Hi, good evening. I'm Safir Anand from Anand. Usually when one lawyer speaks and another lawyer comes in, he has to have a difference of opinion. But I don't think I have a difference of opinion, I have a progressive opinion. So we'll just wait for my presentation to get loaded. So I have a lengthy presentation. I'll skip you the freedom of not going through such a lengthy presentation because some of the features would have already been covered here. Some of them are very basic now for people to know. When you're at an advanced stage in life and you've already done your transactions or you've become familiar, you really don't need to go to some of the basics. What I'll try and do is I'll try and take you to some of the practical elements that come up in a typical transaction. And before I do that, you can open the first slide. Before I do that, I'll just tell you something that comes to me more from a strategic input, considering that lawyers today are also playing the role of business strategist. A lot of our clients would come not only to get a solution to a legal problem, but also we would be interacting with either a venture capitalist or an initial public offer or in other things. There are three facets of life that govern any business transaction today from a legal perspective, which is not part of this, so therefore I'll just share this with you. This is just a practical point. The first facet is about protection, which basically means that whatever intellectual property you have, you should try and have it protected. And the biggest dilemma that people have is they don't know what is to be protected. Either there's a clear divide in their mind between, I have a trademark, should I protect it? If I protect it, for what goods? Should it extend to other goods? What will happen with the internet? Is it the same thing as a physical mode as opposed to a e-commerce mode? So the first challenge is to understand what is to be protected. Now, it's also my practical experience in a franchise transaction, in a license transaction, in most of the other transactions, that people, it's like penny wise, pound foolish. When it comes to protection, the cost of protection is very minuscule. You're talking in thousands of rupees, but the benefits of that protection runs into huge amounts. And in an example like Facebook, it could run into billions of dollars. In some other example, it could run into crores of rupees, lakhs of rupees, but it's never in thousands. So the point is you have to be a little more open-hearted when it comes to seeking protection. You have to be more visionary when it comes to protection. The second element is enforcement, and enforcement here is basically a function of who's going to enforce. Is it going to be the franchisor or is it going to be the franchisee? And of course, I will touch on that. And the third is monetization, which according to me is the most ignored facet of life, probably because lawyers are not good managers and lawyers are not chartered accountants and many lawyers don't read balance sheets and things. Lawyers do not concentrate so much on monetization, whereas the real challenge is when you go to a board, the CEO of the company doesn't really want to know whether he's right or wrong. He wants to know what's the cost of being right and what's the cost of being wrong. Similarly, what's the cost of business and what's the anti of the decision making. So I'm not going to get into the definition of a brand because I assume that the concept of a brand is known. But the only take-home point from this, from a legal perspective, is a brand always has an association with one party. Now, when you say one party, you could be a franchisor, or in certain cases, for example, somebody might say jockey is associated with Page, and Page is a company listed on stock exchange and things of that sort. But at the end of the day, everything inures only to the brand owner. So there's only one concept of ownership, which is of the brand owner. If the brand at any point of time loses the ability to stand up with the owner, for whatever reasons, whether it is because of contractual obligations or contractual mismanagements, or because of public tolerance, or because of certain deviations from the contract or anything of that sort, if at any point of time a brand loses the ability to be associated with the brand owner, a lot of controversies start, and then this concept of ownership of brands gets diluted. Just to borrow from two examples which are not part of my presentation, but they're very well-known brands. You may be familiar with the fact that Eveready brand in India is owned by an Indian company, but nowhere else in the world is it owned by an Indian company. All over the world, it's owned by a foreign company. And there's another brand called Vidol, which is owned in India by Tide Water Oil. But all over the world, Castrol owns the brand. And the reason for this is this particular departure that happens in contractual obligations. There's a dispute going on right now in the Bombay High Court, which is subject matter of a lot of newspaper publicity, which is a dispute between Allied Blenders and Tilak Nagar Industries. And it's about a liquor brand. And it's coming out of a license agreement and the use of the mark post the license agreement. I won't comment upon the matter because it's sub judice, but nevertheless, I just thought I'd touch base. So the only take-home lesson from this is that the association must always be established. Now, if you know that the objective is to establish association, then the basic thing that you have to do is you have to just sit and quiz your mind and say, how am I going to maintain the association if I'm the brand owner? So answers are very logical. The best part about law is the most easy thing to understand if you start applying a very rational simplicity cap. It becomes very complex when you go into agreements and interpretation and Roman language and things of that sort. If I am a brand owner and if I have to protect my brand, all I need to ensure is, one, I must categorically express my ownership of the brand. That means in an agreement. Secondly, I must ensure that there's compliance in the forms of its use, and that is why brand catalogs and other things come up. Third, I must monitor the forms of use. And for example, if you've drawn a black line and somebody makes the line gray, then you have to have an internal process of knowing that what level of deviation is to be tolerated and what level of deviation would not be. And thereafter, you have to have some remedial measures in place, which could be as basic as a telephone call or a meeting or a legal notice or a resolution or an arbitration or litigation, whatever it is. So just to give you the power of brand licensing, you know, it all started with a mouse. Mickey Mouse is a clear example of the highest amount of wealth that has been created out of a franchise operation. And the reason why I love to show this slide is because of the fact that when Mickey Mouse was created, there was no requirement for anything except a movie. There was a steamboat movie that came out in which the character was to be depicted. But somebody had the vision to come and say, here's a character. In all my times to come, I can use the character. And today, if you look at the entire gamut of goods and services, including goods which are, for example, like toothpaste or toothbrush or even chemicals, Mickey Mouse is capable of being endorsed on those for royalty benefits. So this is the power of franchising, and this is one of the reasons in all the franchising seminars, whenever I've come to this forum, I've always said that franchising is a massive wealth creator. You know, just to look at this, I don't know how many of you are currently aware of this, but the market capitalization of the two listed companies in India, which are Domino's Pizza and Page, these are two franchise transactions where I was personally involved. These are the highest PE ratios being ascribed by the market because they are phenomenal wealth creators. So this is the trend of brand licensing. And 2 years back, when I had come into to one of the seminars that was at the Ashok Hotel, and you know, the audience had asked me that, don't you think that because of the after effects of recession in Europe, franchising will slow down? And I had predicted that franchising will grow at a massive rate. There was actually a 70% growth in franchising. We continue to be the world's second largest franchise market after the US. The reason why we're not the first is not because we don't have the ability to grow, but because conceptually a lot of partnership transactions are called, you know, a lot of transactions in India that are treated as partnerships are actually franchising. They follow the model of what typically constitutes the franchising, but they don't use the word franchise or the license, they just use the partnership agreement between A and B. This is a trend of franchising in the last few years, and you can see the graphs have continuously been up. 230 billion was the revenue out of franchising for the year 2012. And just by 150 brands. So this is basically to tell you how the revenues can come in it. Franchising is basically such a powerful tool. You could go right from a movie to a fashion to sports. The IPL is a clear example, to art. And to give you examples of art, there are art lounges all over the world where you can exhibit art. And to non-profitable activities, to publications and other segments. These are some of the brands that have made it to licensing, and the reason why we are showing you this is because if you see here, the entire gamut of the brands is diversified. Some are from entertainment, some are from clothes, some of them are from chocolate, some of them from television, etc. So it's not necessary that to create wealth you have to be, you know, in one of the high-growing segments. You can create a lot of wealth if you have a sustainable brand. India is a booming market for franchising. There's a projected growth rate by the industry standards of 35%, and this reason why, again, this number is sort of more subdued than my own projections is because a lot of things don't get highlighted in terms of the growth. So I'm not going to touch upon some of the successful franchise stories like Baskin-Robbins or Domino's Pizza or Reebok, etc., because you're familiar with them. I'll just jump now to the legal issues. Okay, this is a statement that's come from business, and I thought the most appropriate part was that I should not quote a lawyer's perspective on this or a consultant's perspective, but a business perspective. If handled right, licensing is a low cost and high gain prospect, a right partner. Now, you know, if you look at a definition ever in your life, and that's one of the best things to do in life is if you read more books or read more articles, you really don't have to, you don't need a lawyer. If you look at a basic definition, the answers are right there. It says a right partner. What means what? You need the diligence. It's very simple. This is a business word. Right category, which means that you have to have categories for which you're going to do business. So it's very simple for you to think today that, you know, here's my interest in opening a restaurant, and with restaurants, what comes? Food comes, beverages comes, and tomorrow you might have, you know, endorsement on a matchstick, and thereafter you might have a T-shirt, or you may have a lounge, or you may have a CD, or something of that sort, or you may have a web presence. Right time, which basically means more of a business vision in respect of what the timing. Right pricing, which means contractual obligations in terms of what the pricing are for, you know, standalone fee or a recurring fee or a royalty fee, and whether you're paying too much or, you know, paying too little. And just to give you an example of this, there are actually publications all over the world that prescribe the license rates that you usually comply in industry. So when you don't know whether it should be 3%, 4%, 5%, 6%, and, you know, times have changed. The Indian government does allow a lot of royalty payments to be made under the open routes now, except in certain very restricted sectors. So it's no longer that point of controversy in terms of charging royalty rates. And right control. Right control is basically the ownership of the brand, because that's the paramount thing when it comes to franchising. So these are the statutory provisions that govern. Now, this is the most weird part about India, and I always find this quite intriguing. India is perhaps one of the very few countries in the world that doesn't have a franchise legislation. We are governed by multiple number of laws, and, you know, while I was entering in, one of our colleagues basically said that, isn't it a joke that if you don't have a law, then how are you going to go to court and how will you enforce, because there's so many legislation in place. This is not true, that while India does not have a standalone franchise law, it is extremely easy to enforce. There is in fact hardly any precedent where a brand owner has not succeeded in a court of law against a violation. And to make things interesting, till the year 2005, there were no precedents, not one precedent in India on reported damages. In 2005, the first case on damages was argued, which was on behalf of the Time magazine for the red border. And from 2005 till now, there's been more than 100 cases handled by us alone. So I don't know the count of the entire industry, where damages have been awarded. The interesting part is damages are being awarded both in the respect of punitive. Punitive means penalty, and exemplary, which means to suggest an example.